All right. Well, I'm so happy to be here. And for those of you out there who don't know me, my name is Jess Venable-Novak. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the family engagement manager over at Family Equality. And I'm here talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is Non-Binary Parents Day. And that is a holiday that I celebrate with my partner and my kiddo. And I have the great joy of being here with Johnny Blazes, who is, someone who kind of pinpointed the celebration of Non-Binary Parents Day. Johnny, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you before we get started.
Yeah. So my name's Johnny. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a parent. I'm a non-binary person and a parent. I'm a parent of two girls, one daughter, Juno, who passed away shortly after she was born, and one child who's still living, whose name is Hazel. And I have a partner in my family. His name's Brendan. And we live in Malden, Massachusetts. I'm an educator. I work at an elementary school. I teach social and emotional learning, and I teach movement. So I teach and performing arts. So I teach music and dance and circus. And my other job is at a circus school where ostensibly I teach circus arts, but really I'm also teaching social skills because, they're all interconnected.
Totally. Oh, that's so fun. My daughter would love that. She's totally a theater kid.
Mhm.
Movement and dance and all of that good stuff. Well, I'm super happy to be here with you, and I feel especially privileged because um, I feel like I don't always get to interact with other non-binary parents, and it feels really special to me and precious. So thank you for taking the time and spending it with me, and chatting to our families out there. So I would just love to hear kind of a little bit about your experience with Non-Binary Parents Day and kind of that journey to pinpointing a specific day and wanting to celebrate that.
Yeah. So I do feel really fortunate that I have a handful of non-binary parents in my circles, and I have a good number of trans parents in my circles. And so a lot of my friends who became parents before me feel comfortable celebrating themselves or being celebrated on Mother's Day or Father's Day. Some of them have invented their own days. Some of them choose Parents' Day, which is in July. And I know some non binary people who feel really strongly identified with the word mother or father, or who don't feel identified with that, but don't mind celebrating on that day. And some who don't want to celebrate at all because it doesn't really speak to them. But I found that the year that I became a parent, I really did want a day to celebrate. And I didn't feel good about picking mother or father because neither of them fit for me. And I think a lot of the non-binary experience right now, and I think this is changing, but right now, is that I see a lot of people who are really well intentioned, mostly cis people, allies, who say, well, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can pick male or female. You can pick men's underwear or women's underwear. I don't care which one you pick. And when people say I don't care which one you pick, what I hear is I don't care that I'm forcing you to pick.
Totally.
I don't care that you are being forced into two options, neither of which fits for you. And that doesn't work for me. So I wanted another option. So I just decided with my family we were going to have a non-binary parents day, and I wanted to invite other people in towards that day, knowing that people have their own days through the year, and we've been doing this. We as a collective culture and cultures across the world have been celebrating parents of all sorts for generations and generations. But I wanted a day that was like called in our family non-binary parents day, and so I picked April, the third Sunday in April, because I really liked having it close to Mother's Day and Father's Day. I felt like July was the wrong vibe. I wanted that springtime vibe, that like, that's what I grew up with, was like Mother's Day, Father's Day, that springtime
Right.
vibe.
There's like,
And I
you give flowers, right? Like a
yeah,
spring thing.
exactly. Spring and birth and generation, and yeah, exactly. And I thought about like, should we split the difference between May and June? But I also had this feeling that like for some people being non-binary is about sort of being half and half or being in between, or but that isn't necessarily what it feels like to me. And I also felt like it just shortened the time in this way that didn't feel great to me. But above and beyond, I just thought like, why can't we come first in the calendar year? Like every checklist you check off, you fill out a form. It's like male, female, other, prefer not to say, or male, female, non-binary, other, prefer not to say. So
Yeah.
like, why do we have to be somewhere in the middle or at the end? So I thought, why not go at the beginning and let's just kick off the spring season of parent celebration. Yeah, so that was sort of my thinking about the day. And since then, I've just sort of been posting about it every year and encouraging people to join in if they would like to join in, and encouraging people to speak up about what day they like to celebrate themselves, or if they want to have a day, or if they feel great about Mother's or Father's Day. I also really liked it coming first in the year because a lot of non-binary people get um, get congratulations on the day that maybe doesn't work for them. And I've seen this with trans friends of mine who are like very firmly male identified, man identified, dad identified, getting Mother's Day cards because they were a gestational parent, which is so wildly inappropriate, right? That like every piece of information they've given is, I'm a father, talk to me on Father's Day. And so I like the idea of non-binary Parents Day coming first as this way of being like, hey, everybody, this is my day, not that other one or that other one. Don't worry about that. You don't have to send me a card or say anything to me or post on my Facebook wall. Like, this is my day. So that was also feels good. That's something that feels good about it to me.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting you say that because that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about timing. Is that it kind of like what's the saying, nips that in the bud, like,
Yeah.
if I'm letting the world know that I'm celebrating this day in April, then they're not going to congratulate me in May or June.
Oh,
Which I
you would
know,
think so.
right, fingers crossed, right? Which in my experience, like it definitely feels like dodging something that's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know for my family, this is kind of what you were saying at the beginning was, you know, we I identify as non-binary and we identify as a family with one non-binary parent. So trying to like fit our celebration into a different day had always felt uncomfortable, right? Because we want to celebrate our family how we see our family, what our family is.
Yeah.
So beyond just like it mattering a lot to me as a non-binary person and parent, it also matters a lot to my partner and our daughter that we have a day where we can celebrate how we know ourselves, how we see ourselves, and how we want the world to see ourselves.
Yeah.
So I just like really feel that deeply, and it's come to mean so much to our family. Um, and I'm just curious, kind of like, when you started this journey of kind of pinpointing this day and celebrating it, has it evolved for you, or what does it come to mean to you, if you don't mind
Mhm.
sharing?
Um, Well, this year in particular, I'm having more conversations like the one we're having now, with people I've never met who are telling me how excited they are about Non-Binary Parents Day, and also friends who live afar who themselves might not be non-binary but are queer and in queer community. And they're reflecting back word that they're hearing from their communities whom I'm not connected to directly. So that has been the big change for me, is like realizing that there really was a desire for this. And I mean, I'm not surprised by that. Of course, there was a desire for this, but just to hear that people are like getting excited, and also that it's meaningful to them. Like I'm actually like welling up a little bit and trying not to cry, because that's just really what is moving me very much. Because you know, you mentioned this when we were sort of chatting ahead of time, but that like it can be very lonely
Mm,
being a non-binary parent, uh, and not really having a lot of peers, especially directly in community. And even though I mentioned I do have several, like I'm talking about a handful of people compared to all of the cis parents that I know. Um, and I think that like the celebration for me has been a little lonely, not in that like my friends and family make me feel loved, but I did feel a little bit like I was just sort of like standing on this rock being like, here I am on this place I've planted a flag and we're all pretending it's a real thing, but like it doesn't have to be pretend anymore, you know, that there's like people signing on. And yeah, so I think that's how it's evolved.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Internally at Family Equality, I feel like our journey was kind of the same. Like, I've known about Non-Binary Parents Day, like some other staff, folks on our communications team know about it. And this year we were why, why are we kind of like dancing around it? Like, why wouldn't we celebrate it as an organization, how we celebrate any other Parents Day? And like folks will see in the blog post at the bottom, we like made swag that you can buy for the non-binary parent in your life. And something that was really important to me was like a greeting card. Like my daughter loves giving gifts and she loves going to we're a big arts and crafts family. So for big holidays, she likes to actually go to the store and buy a card because it's like, it's extra special. Like
Right,
we make each
right.
other cards all the time. And I just like selfishly thought of her when we were talking about it. I was like, I want my daughter to be able to like write me a card that she doesn't have to like make herself. um and just what you were saying, like I really feel like um as a queer person, I'm kind of always hesitant about formalizing things.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like in our bones a little bit. um
Especially those of us who have sort of a collectivist perspective and a, you know, a cooperative perspective, that I'm like, well, I didn't check with the committee that this is the right date, but like there's no committee of non-binary parents.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's a lot of, it's like, it's the collectivism piece. It's just like really wanting to queer things and go outside of the system. Um,
Yeah.
and then something else you mentioned that, not just with non-binary parents, but with queer people, with queer families, like we have existed like way before the vocabulary that we use now. And we've always been surviving. We've always been thriving. We've always been parents. We've always been celebrating our families like before we formalized any of it. So there's always this like part of me that really wants to honor that. But I think I've also seen the power of, you keep using the word formalizing,
Mhm.
of the power of formalizing something, because then so many people can plug into it. And it really gets at some of that isolation, I think.
Yeah, and we're talking about representation too, you know, talking about your daughter being able to go buy a card, like regardless of whether any individual family wants to buy swag or wants to buy into any particular tradition or ritual or way of celebrating, just the fact of a non-binary parent card existing is some representation that can exist for your kid. I mean, I don't know about in your family, but in our family, when we read picture books, we're often changing the names or pronouns or parent names of the characters in the books because so my parent name is Zazie. There's not one single picture book out there that I found that has a Zazie in it, right? So it's very normal in our household that one read through of this book will have um, a baba and a mama, and then another read through will have a Zazie and a dad. And sometimes we just do mom and dad, but we just mix it up read to read. But just the fact that like we have to do that extra labor in order to have some kind of visibility for our child to see that there are other parents out there besides mom and dad. And I know that, you know, queer families of all stripes are doing that same thing of just like grabbing any visibility they can. And I think a card, as simple as that sounds, um, is part of that. Is part of like showing your child that like, yes, we exist and others like us exist and we're legitimate. And see, here's this little thing that proves it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also like the fact that you brought up reading stories. That is like same in our house. Oh my gosh. I remember, my daughter's she's old enough to read on her own now. And I remember the anxiety of her making that move of like, she
Mm,
always talked explicitly about changing pronouns and stories and parent names and things like that. But I really felt like she was going to let it go when she started reading on her own.
right.
And it's completely heartwarming and I'm going to tear up, but she doesn't. Like, she changes things on purpose herself when we're reading together, because she gets the representation piece. Like she knows that she knows how to read the pronouns
Right.
as they're written, but she also knows what it feels like to have her family not represented in books, and that's important to her. So I
That's
know
so
that.
that's so sweet to hear. My daughter is too, and so she's a long way off from reading to herself. So I've had that same worry, but it's so hopeful to hear that from you about your kiddo.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that was like a huge anxiety point for me. Like, kindergarten started and I was like, oh no, we're gonna lose it. And I know, like, through meeting so many families that, like, it's not just non-binary parents, it's not just trans parents, it's LGBTQ parents in general, that do things like that and have to do that extra labor. Um, yeah, so I just, it's one of those things that it's extra labor, but it also, like, brings us together a little bit. It's comforting to know that people are doing that all over. Um, Awesome. Well, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, but I am wondering, what's something you love about being a non-binary parent?
Hmm. Well, let's see. So something I love about being a non-binary person in general is that I'm a teacher, and uh, I I love that I get to be a role model to young people who have questions about their gender, or who have a lot of certainty about their gender, but who otherwise haven't had a lot of role models for non-binary adults in their lives. Um, and that's something that's been happening more and more each year. But this year is like just really, this has been the year of non-binary kids in my life and in my different jobs. Um, so that's something really special to me, especially because if I did have those role models when I was a kid, we didn't have as much language about it. Um, and just to be able to have conversations that are really frank and open and beautiful with these kids that I get to mentor. So that's really important to me. And I think it's also important for cis kids as well, just to have examples of lots of different types of adults in their life. And I'm very, very fortunate. I teach at an independent school in Boston that's very small and very progressive. And so uh, I teach sex ed as part of my job. And a couple weeks ago, we started the sex ed unit by watching a video of a trans man talking about puberty. And what I said to the kids was, we're starting with this video because most sex ed doesn't center the voice of trans people. And so we wanted to start by centering that voice as we go into this journey. And I said, can someone explain back what I meant by that? And like, 6 hands shoot up. They nailed it. They knew exactly what all of those words meant in that sentence and why we were doing it. So that's something that's really important to me, is to exist in the world in a way that sets an example for young people and for adults too. I think in terms of being a parent, being a queer and non-binary parent, I think what's exciting to me about that is that there are so many scripts that are laid out for us about how we're supposed to be as people, that are handed down to us culturally and through media, and are really strongly enforced. And this is not news to anybody who's watching this video, right?
Right.
But that in particular, there's so many scripts about parenthood and about partnership and about moms and dads, and how moms act and how dads act, and how they create family and how they raise family. And even some really like wonderfully progressive friends of mine who are cis and straight, like still I find them following these scripts in ways that really surprised me, because as a queer person, we have this opportunity that a lot of us take at a very young age to just throw out those scripts and write our own scripts. And so as a parent, that was always part of parenting for me, is like, I can see all of these narratives and I'm gonna, you know, pick and choose what I think works really well, but I'm just writing my own script as I go. And that's so inherent to being non-binary in general and to being queer. And so applying that to being a parent means that I have this like foundation for questioning in a healthy hopefully not too obsessive way, like why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm parenting and how I'm creating family. And I think that cis people can totally do that and straight people can do that. And absolutely, like everybody maybe has that capacity and maybe should, I don't like to should, but maybe they should
Right.
have some questions about those scripts. But being queer and non-binary, it's just like endemic to who we are, right? In this way that we're like, well, I'm not this and not this, so I guess I'm forging my path. Um, that's something I love about it, that like we get to create a new normal for our children because we're creating a new normal for ourselves all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I so feel that. I was recently talking to a friend, um, and they're cis and straight, and our conversation was just about that. Like, they're one of those people who is trying to unlearn and rewrite for themselves, and I'm just like, I am so grateful that I didn't even have to do that. Like, it's already in my bones, and there was no instruction manual, so it's like, so for me, it's been so liberating as a parent. Yeah, I think it's really precious, and that's also one of my favorite things about being a queer non-binary person and parent, and um all of that good stuff. So I think you hit it right on the head. um so I know some of our families watching, I think this might be the first time they're hearing about Non-Binary Parents Day. And knowing our families, I think they're going to be pretty excited. So what are some things that you do to celebrate the day with your family? I'd love to hear.
Um, we haven't made our plans yet, even though it's in a couple of days. It's
Hey,
kind of a
hey,
wild year, to
yeah.
be honest, right? It's been different each year. Uh, so um, the first year that we celebrated Non-Binary Parents Day was the year that my first daughter was born. And as I mentioned, she passed away a few days after her birth. So that was in 2018. Um, and I uh, so I already had this sort of idea about a non-binary parents day, and we knew we were going to have a memorial for this baby who had passed away. And so it ended up lining up that we had the memorial on the same day as non-binary parents day, which yeah, was really beautiful and meaningful. And my partner and I are both musicians. So and our families are full of musicians as well too. And so we basically had a big concert where we just like played a bunch of music. My band, and we put together a pickup band made up of most of my band members, and our parents read poems and stories and reflections, and we it's just like a big concert basically. And we had I think we rented out a big performance venue. We probably had about 200 people there who, of course, I'm tearing up talking about it, but who had never met this baby because she was just in the NICU for 6 days. And our closest friends did get to meet her because part of being queer often is building chosen family, right? So our chosen family of our closest friends had actually met our daughter, Juno. But this vast room full of people who hadn't met her, but were just impacted by her life because they love us and they care about us, and because they're moved by the story of this baby who had really struggled to live and then had passed gently. And so my first non-binary parents day was a big concert and full of like flowers and hugs and a lot of tears and love. um, and then the next year I think we had a big dinner at a friend's house that also coincided with Easter and a friend's birthday, so we all
Totally.
wore noxious shades of pink just to kind of be silly.
That sounds
And
amazing.
at that point I had a new baby who was 3 months old. So I was like, this is my first time really socializing, and I'm a non-binary parent and I haven't slept in 3 months. Um, and then the last year was in a pandemic. And to be truthful, I do not remember what we did because pandemic brain. But I
Totally.
think we like went for a walk and that kind of stuff. So this year I'm not sure. Maybe we'll go roller skating. Definitely we'll want to be outside. Maybe we moved to a new house, so maybe we'll do some gardening. I don't know.
That's something, same, like I don't have a great memory, and then also like pandemic brain, but um I know we always try to celebrate by doing something outside, and it's usually like starting our garden or like cleaning out our
Yeah.
garden beds or like doing our first like little transplants or something. Again, I feel like typical like parent day, like I grew up celebrating Mother's Day and Father's Day, and it was always like springy and flowers and things like that. Um, and we're also suckers in my family for like sweet treats, like any excuse to
Mhm.
have like um cookies for breakfast or like cinnamon rolls. Right?
Yes, my partner is a really, really good baker, so any like birthday or holiday is like a great excuse to come up with something that I love to eat. Chocolate babka is one of my favorite requests, so maybe
Yeah.
I'll get that this week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I just really encourage people to think about what kind of celebrations feel good to you, but also like and it's an opportunity to break down a script of what we expect out of these days even bigger, right? So I think a lot of times there's an expectation that one partner will do all the planning and surprise the other partner, or like, there's breakfast in bed, there's gifts, there's flowers, there's going out to dinner, whatever your sort of like family script is, from your own upbringing or from what the world has told you. But it could be an opportunity to, instead of um expecting kind of that meta script of like plan a surprise, execute it, have a feeling about it. Could be like, let's have a conversation. What would you like to do today? Would you like some time alone? Would you like some time together? Do you like having flowers? Is there some other way to celebrate you that we could do? um do you want to have a dance party?
Right.
So I think it's a great opportunity to like think about how we operate as families too, and like how we celebrate each other. Do we participate in it? Do we like being surprised? Do we like that kind of caretaking of having someone else do all the thinking? And I think every family and partnership, uh, and solo parenting also, like, what does that look like? If you're solo parenting, are there friends you can reach out to help you feel celebrated? If you're the friend of a solo non-binary parent, can you reach out and make sure they feel celebrated? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And still sticking with that idea that like we get to write the script for
Yeah.
what feels good to us and our families. I know that's really important to my family in general, but also like we're really we hold the idea of family very close. So even when we're celebrating like one of us, like a birthday or parents' day or something, we're still kind of like, okay, how do we want to do this as a family? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like that's what means the most to us. Yeah, so I really appreciate that idea of like getting to write our own scripts again. Um,
Mhm.
cool. Well, just like in wrapping things up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our families or share about the day in general?
Um, well, let's see. I was thinking a little bit about sort of the loneliness of being a non-binary parent, and hoping that this is a day that people reach out to each other and find networks, and that like maybe this blog post can be a resource for that. I know there's a lot of queer parenting groups on Facebook, but just hoping that people reach out and find representation of each other, um, pictures of families that look like yours or don't look like yours, but just remembering that non-binary parents look a lot of different ways, just like parents of every gender look a lot of different ways. So I've been thinking about that, and about like, that loneliness, and infant loss is something that's really important to me. And I talk about it, not super often these days with a 2-year-old running that I'm running after, but it is something I talk about when I have the opportunity. And I think particularly queer families who experience infant loss and child loss is a particular type of loneliness, because there's so much material out there for straight families and for cis parents, and especially for gestational parents. There just isn't a lot of material out there for learning how to move through grief as a trans parent, as a non-binary parent, especially one who's gestated. And I was really fortunate that I have some incredible allies in my life. A friend of mine, Darcy, who is also a lost parent, and she's a cis straight woman, and she just like has always gone above and beyond to make me feel welcome and part of the community. there's a really beautiful poem called "You're the Mother of All Mothers" that she took and she translated she like copied it all down and changed all the words to be about um, being a Zazi, my parent name, and has just always really been one of those like shining people that without any needing to prompt or course direct, just like immediately it was like knew how to bring me into this community in a way that really honored me and like has me as part of some of the music that she puts together for her annual event, just like centering that there are all sorts of parents who experience loss. So that's something that's important to me, and that just other parents out there know that I'm here and we exist. And there's while there's not a lot of materials out there, I think they're coming. I think people are writing and illustrating and making music and trying to show up for each other. And yeah, so that's like my little corner that I want to make sure I get to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate that. And we have a lot of uh, prospective parents and folks who are in the journey of building their families in our family equality community. So we're always excited to make space for everyone's experiences. And you're not just a queer family once you've like achieved some time frame. Like you're a queer family when you say that you're a queer family.
Yeah.
In my opinion, in our opinion. Um, well, thank you so much for hanging out with me, Johnny. This has been incredibly precious, and also just really special to me. And I am, personally so grateful for you kind of bringing about Non-Binary Parents Day, because I feel like for me and my family, it's done just what you said and made us feel like we're validated and we're celebrated and we can find other people like us. And it's just made a huge difference in our lives. And I know there are other families out there who it's really made a difference in their lives too. So I can't thank you enough for our time together and also just all you've done related to Non-Binary Parents Day. So thanks for your time. It's been lovely to chat with you. And thanks everyone out there for watching. Have a
Yeah.
good one.
Thank you so much for having me.